Hello, everyone, and happy Wednesday. It is beautiful weather here in Southern California today. I am Michelle from Pasadena Humane. I am the outreach coordinator, and today I am joined by Dr. Kash from Basepaws. How are you, Dr. Kash?
Hi, Michelle. I'm doing well.
Good, and I know you're on the East Coast, so how's the weather over there today?
Well, right now it's nice and sunny, but it was a bit rainy this morning, so I'm happy about that.
So I think we would welcome the rain here because this weather just makes everything super dry and fire season is so high. So before I turn everything over to you, I want to welcome everybody, and we're going to go over a few webinar reminders just in case this happens to be your first time joining us today. And we also have a special giveaway today. So we will not only be giving away a Basepaws DNA kit, we will also be giving away a Basepaws dental health kit, and that's only if you are joining us live. So as you guys come in to watch the presentation, your names are being put onto a random on the wheel of names, and at the end of the presentation, we will choose our winners. So thank you, Dr. Kash. That's so exciting. We've never done that on our webinar before.
Yeah, I'm excited.
So, all right, let me go over these reminders. I'm going to show everybody my screen so you can see that. So today's webinar, oops, present mode. All right, so for today's webinar, it is audio visual. So you guys are automatically muted and we can't see and hear you, even though you can see and hear us. So with that in mind, please use the question box on the inside of your screen and we'll ask questions as we can. Depending on the number of questions, we may not get to all of them, but we will really try our best. And if you can, save your questions to the end because Dr. Kash may answer your question during the course of her presentation. And today we will be talking about cat genetics. And I will say this little guy here is Bagheera. He is my cat, and he actually had his own DNA test done not too long ago. In a couple of weeks, we will be talking about trap, neuter, return, and monitor with our very own Chris Vermone, aka the Cat Guy, and the Community Cat Podcast. And then in August, we will be talking about the science behind vaccines. What are they and why do our pets need them? Okay. As usual, this webinar is being recorded, so if you missed any portion of it, you'll get a copy of it tomorrow afternoon. If you enjoy this webinar as much as we enjoy giving it, you can go ahead and use the donation link that I'll also put in the chat box, and you can make an impact to the animals at Pasadena Humane. And without further ado, Dr. Kash, you can go ahead and take it away.
All right, so let me get my screen all set up here. All right, I hope you guys can see the slides now. So today, thanks again so much, Michelle, for having us speak to you guys. I'm really excited to be here and share a little bit about, everything that Basepaws is doing to make cats' lives better. So we're best known for our DNA tests, but as I'll talk about later in the presentation, we are launching a whole slew of new health screening tests that you can do from the comfort of home. So we're very excited to be offering this for cats everywhere. So what I'll cover today is briefly go over some basic of genetics so that we're all kind of on the same page and understand some of the terms And if you've done one of our DNA tests, some of the terms that you might see in the report when we give the results of your cat's DNA test. And some interesting things about the history of cats and why we see some of the things that we see when it comes to breed and their health. And then I'll wrap it up by talking about some of our new and innovative tests and talk about the oral microbiome and what that means for your cat's health and dental health. So I'm going to start off with just a quick question and see if you guys know some of these interesting trivia questions about cats. So if you do know the answer, Michelle might be able to pull up a little poll and you can go ahead and answer, and we'll give you a few seconds. Does anyone know how many pairs of chromosomes cats have?
Is it 17, 19, or 21? I'm gonna leave the poll open for about 5 more seconds. All right, and we're closing in 3, 2, and 1. So Dr. Kash, 35% of people said 19 and 61% said 21.
Interesting. Okay, well, why don't I go ahead and show you guys the answer? Can you guys see my screen now, Michelle?
No.
Okay.
I have to share again.
Share again. Okay. All right. Let's see. Maybe you can see now. Okay,
I see
perfect.
it now.
Sorry about that. It's for some reason it closed everything. But yeah, for those of you guys that said 19 pairs, that's right. So they actually have less than maybe most of us think, 19. And you'll see this come up, you know, when we look at the report, and you can see the different, oops, sorry, where some of our genetic markers live, and we'll take a closer look at this. So just a little bit about myself. So I, after vet school, went into, you know, I really love technology. So I studied biotechnology and bioinformatics, and also had, you know, my own startup trying to bring more technology into the veterinary space. And after that, I joined Basepaws, you know, to put all of my loves together. So this has been a really great adventure for me. And I'm really happy to be, you know, speaking with you guys and trying to find new innovative ways to improve health for all pets. So I'm very excited to be doing the work that we're doing. So, you know, one of the questions that I think a lot of pet parents and veterinarians ask is, you know, why are we doing DNA testing? What's the big deal? And the big deal is that it really is a tool that we have now, especially with the technologies being available to us. It's become so affordable to do a DNA test when, you know, just a few years ago, it was something very novel and new. So it helps us to, in the case of pets, to understand breed. And this is especially interesting when it comes to cats because they are not like dogs in a lot of ways. And we'll take a look at why that is. And the other thing, especially as a veterinarian, is that it helps us for recognizing disease early. And that means we can treat and prevent some of the bad outcomes if we know about some of these things early. And that's what a DNA test allows. And again, it's a way for us to connect with our pets because they can't speak to us. So knowing the DNA, especially if you rescued a cat who you don't have much of a history about, it's a really good way to get to know your cat better. And finally, it's a way that we can individualize care. And what that means is really being able to understand the things that make your cat unique: health, breed, lifestyle, all of those things, and catering the care specific to them, so that we're really giving them everything that they need. So we'll talk about each of these in more depth. But before we go, some of the basic terms that I want to make sure that we all know and are familiar with. So I'll mention genotype and phenotype. So what that really means is genotype is the DNA, is the things that actually are coded in the pet's genome, the things that we look for when you send us a swab of their saliva. And that's what actually encodes some of the things that we see, which is the phenotype. So that's what we can actually see and, identify, especially, particular breeds, particular characteristics, which we also call traits. So that's something that's really important to kind of differentiate and keep in mind when we talk about genetics and genomics. The idea of epigenetics is something where the environment and everything that is outside of the actual coded DNA that actually makes an impact on our cat's health and lifestyle. So that's a really important concept also to keep in mind, especially for when if the cats have a genetic predisposition, it doesn't necessarily mean that that is going to be presented the way it would if there was no environmental impact. So a lot of things, for example, you may have a genetic predisposition to a certain disease, but we're able to, just by changing the environment, maybe the diet, maybe the lifestyle, we're able to actually change the outcome. So that's the concept of epigenetics. Couple more terms here. Allele, what that means is, all of us, cats, dogs, humans, we all get two copies or two versions, one from each of our parents for a certain gene. So when we talk about allele, we're talking about each of those individual copies. And if you have two of the same copies, we say that's a homozygote. And if you have two different copies, we say that's a heterozygote. So just some terms to keep in mind. And lastly, I'll talk a lot about markers. And what that means is it's a certain, either a set of genes or a known set of DNA sequences that actually link to something. Either it's a breed or a specific trait for a specific health condition. So when we say marker, it's referring to something that's in the genome that we can actually point to and say, hey, okay, this cat has a marker, for example, for chronic kidney disease or something along those lines. And then a mutation is the case where you have a certain set of what's called normal nucleotide sequences or normal DNA makeup. A mutation is when one of those normally present nucleotides or normally present piece of DNA is mutated into something that is abnormal. Sometimes, a lot of the time, this happens naturally and we don't see any effect, but some of the times these mutations can actually cause changes that we actually see and actually be a cause of certain diseases. So that's something also that's important, and we think a lot about when we look into our DNA testing and seeing some of the results for our customers. Okay, so with all of the terms and that type of stuff aside, let's actually get into, what we can learn from doing a DNA test. So the first thing is breed. And some of the things that we, identify classic breeds by, we know is the coat color. Also, there is eye color, face shape, there's ears, feet, and toes. And all of these, what we can say traits, do go back to their genetics. And some of them are in a very simple inheritance pattern. So we can actually trace it right back to a particular gene. And if you want to learn more about these specific traits, and maybe your cat has an extra toe, maybe they have pointed ears, and you're curious about that, these are some of the things that our test will look at to determine the breed, but that's not the only thing. So if you're interested to learn more about how some of these traits come about, if you go to our blog, there's some excellent blog posts that kind of describe this in more detail of how some of the genes relate to these phenotypes. So you can also, same thing with tail conformation, coat texture, and especially if your cat is what we call lovingly a polycat, so a mix of all different breeds, which most cats are, then you can see, a mix of these phenotypes. So it's what really makes genetic testing cool, is you can kind of see all these different features from the that's making up your cat's unique phenotype. Okay, so let's move on to the second reason why we do DNA testing. So this, I'm very interested about is, how can we actually recognize disease early, especially if they have a predisposition genetically. So one of the things that's really important when it comes to DNA testing and health is that a lot of disease, especially if it's there's a genetic cause, we're going to see it at a very young age. So especially things like, let's say, polycystic kidney disease, we're going to see that, very early in a cat's life. From a kitten to maybe less than 2 years of age. A lot of diseases are actually, sadly, that are even younger, those kittens don't even make it out alive. So when it comes to genetic predispositions, especially in cats, the research, there is some research out there, but there's a lot missing because of some of these mutations and things being not even having a live kitten. So it's good for you, if you can, to get your cats tested early so that we are well aware going into their mature age if they have any predispositions, and so we can work with your veterinarian to kind of prevent some of those negative outcomes if there are any. So what we would recommend really is testing early, so before the 2 years if it's possible. And it's super easy. It's just a simple swab in their mouth. You can do from the comfort of home. So it's something that you can do, again, to get to know your cat from a breed and health perspective. So I'll go over some of the diseases that we look at and kind of tie in some of the things that we learned in the first section, talking about genetics. So when these genes when we only get one copy from your mom or your dad, but it's what's called autosomal dominant. That's one way a gene can be inherited. That means that even though you only have one copy, because of this particular inheritance patterns, and there's 4 of them, so this is the first one called autosomal dominant, that means just having one is enough for you to get that disease. And polycystic kidney disease is an example of one of these autosomal dominant inheritance patterns, and it's something we test for. So just by having one copy, your cat can have this disease, and we're able to know this from doing the test. So the second inheritance pattern is autosomal recessive. And the word autosomal means that out of those 19 chromosomes that we said our cats have, 17 of them are what's called autosomal. So they are not the sex chromosomes, which we have 2 of them, either XX and XY. So these genes live in those other 17 chromosomes. So the word recessive means you have to have 2 copies of this particular gene to have the disease. And if you only have one copy, we say that you're a carrier. So some of the examples that we test for that have this particular inheritance pattern of for diseases are some myopathies. So what myopathies are essentially, they have to do with muscle, and they get muscle weakness at a very young age. And if this is a genetic cause, then we're able to find if your cat has that. And we also know that that means they must have 2 copies of this gene. If they only have 1 copy, they will not have this particular disease, but we would warn against breeding that cat because they are then able to pass down this particular mutation and cause this disease to happen maybe in a kitten in a future litter. So the third inheritance pattern, so if you remember, I said we have 2 sex chromosomes, so an X and a Y. And since everybody has an X, we have this pattern where it's linked to the X chromosome. So this particular gene lives on the X chromosome. So it can, and there's different patterns if you are a male or a female. So if it's on the X chromosome, and since males only have 1, you'll always get the disease if it's a male. But in the case of a female who would have 2 X chromosomes, there's a chance that one of them could be a carrier. And if it's on both, then there's a chance that they can get the disease. So an example of this that we see commonly is the factor, coagulation factor deficiency. So this is something we test for to see if your cat has any issues with blood clotting. So this is a good way to know, if they're going into, for example, a surgery, a spay, things like that. Do the vets need to be concerned about taking precautions if they have a propensity to be bleeding more than your average cat? So that's something we can look at as well. So the last inheritance pattern that I'll share with you guys is what's called polygenic. And kind of the idea of this particular pattern is that it doesn't live on 1 chromosome, this particular mutation. It takes effect when a whole bunch of different genes work together to have this particular effect. So an example of this that we test for, the disease is hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, or commonly we call it HCM. So it has to do with their heart, and it's a type of heart disease that can be genetic in cats. And it's a combination of a lot of genes working together to cause this disease. So it's a really good way to get checked early so that there's a lot of things we can do to manage cats that might have these markers. So we can definitely make their life a lot better in the future, especially if we know ahead of time that they have this type of marker and they're at a high risk for getting this disease. Okay, so now we'll move on to actually looking at what a Basepaws report looks like. So you've swapped your cat, you've sent the sample in to our lab, and you've received a report. So one of the first things you'll see in the report is the breakdown of breed. And this is really interesting because our database is made up of thousands and thousands of cats, and in the core of it are these pedigree cats. And pedigree cats are the pure lines of cats where we identify them by their particular breed, and we're able to give you this percent similarity of how similar is your cat's DNA to these pedigree cats. So in this example, we're seeing that this particular cat has all these different percentages that are matching to those pedigree cats in our database. So I will go forward here and show you. So we talked about the 19 chromosomes, and you can kind of see where those genes live and are matching to those cats in the database. So you see there's a lot of this light blue color, and that's matching to this particular Western breed group. And then it further breaks it down into the breeds that are within that group, and you can see the breakdown here. If I go forward, you can kind of see that this particular cat is definitely more matching to the Western breeds as compared to the Eastern breeds. And then it's a very, very detailed report, so I'm only showing you the very brief summary. And you can see a sample report on our website as well if you're curious. And it'll go deeper into each of these breeds and talk about, the things, the characteristics, things that they're predisposed to. So you can really try and understand, okay, why am I seeing my cat do these certain things, or why do they look a certain way? And really begin to get to know your cat better. So the second portion, and if you get this particular add-on to your test, so if you're getting the health markers tested as well, you'll see these 4 statuses next to each of the different genetic markers that we test for. So here I'm showing you the example for polycystic kidney disease. And this particular cat status is that it's clear for this particular mutation, but you can see anything from being a carrier, so that means they only have 1 copy, at risk or at high risk for the different markers that we test for. So that's something that you can share with your veterinarian and work with them. If you know that you're at risk or at high risk for a particular disease, then it's a good time to talk about, prevention and management and maybe even treatment. All right, so now that we've talked about sort of the health side and breed, let's talk about the fun stuff. And that's really about getting to know our cats better. And something that's really different about cats when we compare them to dogs is that cats actually bred themselves as compared to dogs. We know dogs came from certain lines, and we have very good records of how they were bred. So we're able to trace that back, and you know exactly what breeds make up your dog if you do, for example, a dog DNA test. But if you do a cat DNA test, this is very, very difficult because cats, they domesticated themselves or alongside humans. Humans were in their kind of agricultural years, and cats were helping them out by catching mice. So they started living and breeding with each other. And then it wasn't actually only until recent history that humans decided to take these kind of mixed cats and then breed them based on their physical looks into these pedigree breeds that we think of as pure today. But what we have to keep in mind is that those pedigree breeds actually came from these mixed breed cats. So we're going to see when we peel back the onion, as what we do with our Basepaws test, is we see all of those genetic markers that tell us about all of those different breeds. So it's really different from looking at a dog and looking at a cat. When you look at them genetically, you're going to see all of those mixes. So it's really interesting, and you can see, what is it most similar to. So it's a really fun way to get to know your cat better, and we're really excited to be offering that. So some of the things that we see because of this unusual history is that we see some diseases even are related to particular combination of breeds. And we can only do this because of our awesome customers that are, sending out their sample, participating in the research that we do. So we're actually able to make the cat genome even better because of all this new information that we're learning. So it's a really great way to kind of get to know your cat now and continue to keep learning as we learn and do more research on cat breeds and diseases as well. So here's another question I'll pop up. Does anyone know what this condition is called when the cat has 2 different colors to their eyes? I'll give you a few seconds again.
We've got heterochromia, heterozygous, heterotroph, and heterogeneous. So, and Dr. Cashwell, the audience is answering this question. If 95% of all cats are mixed breeds, then unlike dogs, there are no purebred cats. Is that correct?
Yes, and that's actually something That's very different and is something that we need to, talk more about, because even the pedigree breeds, they come from these mixed breeds. So that's a key difference. And I think a lot of us, even as veterinarians, will look at a big cat and we think, oh yeah, that's a Maine Coon, but genetically, they're essentially going to be a mixed cat.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close this poll up, and overwhelmingly, the audience has said it is called heterochromia.
Oh my goodness, you guys are brilliant. Great job. Great job. So I'm going to move on to our next slide here. Okay, so the last thing I'll talk to you guys about, why we do DNA testing is to be able to provide this sort of personalized care. And how we do that is, by sending us your sample, we're looking at the breed and also your health markers. But we're also considering the age of your cat. Are they a senior? Are they a kitten? And are they on any medication? And this is especially relevant when we talk about the oral microbiome, which I'll get into a little bit later. But something that's, relatively new and is going to be something that becomes more commonplace is we're going to take into account all of these different factors when we as veterinarians make recommendations to our clients, because now we have this ability to combine all of this new data on our pets, which we now are able to do for ourselves as well. So personalized medicine, I think, is going to be the future. And this is, just the beginning. So it's a really good time. If you guys are thinking about getting a DNA test for your cat, this would be something that would be very relevant for you, I think, in the coming years. So I'll speak a few minutes about the oral microbiome. And this is, very exciting because it's part of our new tests, and into the future. We're all learning a lot. And it happened kind of by accident, because we were studying the DNA from these oral saliva swabs. So looking in the cat's mouth, and we saw that there's actually a lot more information. And this had to do with the microbes, so the bacteria that live in your cat's mouth that actually change based on their diet, lifestyle, and any medications that they're on that tell us actually about their dental health. So what we saw actually was that some cats had dental disease, and they had different types of bacteria living in their mouth than those cats that maybe didn't have dental disease or a different type of dental disease. So, we can talk a lot more in a different webinar maybe about dental disease itself. But some things to look for in your cat is that, because they don't tell us, if they're in pain, especially from a dental problem, is, have they stopped eating, or are they having some sort of pain, and are they pawing at their mouth, maybe drooling, those kinds of signs that you can look for to see if there might be some dental pain. But because they are so brave and they won't tell us if they are actually feeling bad, one of the good ways to check in their mouth is looking at their oral microbiome. So this is kind of a complicated slide, but basically what we're seeing is that we have all these different bacteria that live in our mouth and in our cat's mouth. And the cats with healthy mouths on the left here look different from the cats that have actual disease. So there's more of this bad bacteria in cats that have different types of dental disease. So that's what we're looking at with our new dental test. So it looks like this. We have our swab and we take a sample, and what we can see is, their risk for developing the top 3 most common dental diseases. So they're periodontal disease, tooth resorption, and halitosis, which is bad breath. And that relates to, different systemic diseases, because the bad bacteria can travel down into kidney, liver, and heart. So all of this we can get to know with this simple swab done at home. So I think that's going to be another powerful way for us to do a lot of prevention and keep our cats healthier, living longer. So that's something I just wanted to share with you guys. It's brand new. Go check it out. It's on our website. So the dental health test. It's a great way to, get started on some prevention on dental disease. I'll try and wrap it up here. Just talk about some of the cool things that Basepaws is doing in terms of making it better for cats and their health. A lot of research that we work on, right now we have a number of trials, including, studying feline diabetes, chronic kidney disease, longevity. We're actually actively working on improving the actual genome. So this is something that's going to help pet companies, human research as well, because cats and humans actually do share a lot of commonalities when it comes to their genomic information. And there's a big long list of things that we're working on, because we are all passionate about making cats' lives better. So I encourage you guys to check it out, spend some time on our website, read some blogs, and participate. And if your cats do qualify for any of these diseases, you get a free kit. So that's also great. And I'd love to, hear from you guys if you have any questions. And again, Michelle and Pasadena Humane, thank you so much for having us. I really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kash, for all of the information. I know that for myself personally, this information was very helpful, because I had my cat have a DNA test, because he was an orphaned kitten, and we got him when he was a day old. So we have no idea what his backstory was, except that he was abandoned. So we kind of, very fortunate that, Basepaws has this program, and, we had his DNA tested, and he's young enough where he doesn't have any of those health markers. So I think, he's going to live for a very long time. But I will say that it was very, very interesting when looking at the different breeds and kind of going, oh yeah, he's got those traits. Like, he was an athlete, and it's like, yeah, okay, thinking about the things that he does around the house, and he's got the zoomies, and like
That's awesome.
the height that he can get when chasing the laser pointer is amazing. And so I really enjoyed reading about the different breeds. So, but I did
remember. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, but I did have one question about that, because cat DNA is fairly, new science. How reliable is the information?
So that's a good question. And the way that our test is designed is that once you submit your sample to us, your report is going to be updated as our database updates. And we're looking again at the similarity of your cat's DNA to this core of these pedigree cats and all of the other cats that are in our database. And every day we get new samples, so our database actually updates every day, but you'd go crazy if we sent you a new report every day. So we try to send a big update when there's major changes to kind of the breeds. So if we're looking at, like the example where that particular cat was matching to a lot of the Western breeds, the goal is, to see how close we can get. And there's kind of what we call the polycat, which means we don't actually have, there's some DNA of your cat that's not matching to any cats at the moment to the cats in the database. So we're always trying to get that number down. So depending on how much polycat your cat has, as the database updates, the idea is to get that number down. So you'll see that because every cat essentially is going to have some sort of a mix, we're looking at, what are they most similar to, which is very different from dog, where we can, say you're 100% golden retriever, which we're just not going to be able to tell with cats.
Okay. So, and then are you guys able to tell with the dental health kit, are you able to tell if they have any dental autoimmune issues?
So right now, the dental test tests for the top 3 most common dental diseases. So it's periodontal disease, tooth resorption, and halitosis. But we're right now working on looking at some of the other common dental diseases like stomatitis, and also the relationship of dental disease to systemic disease. So one of the big focuses right now for us is chronic kidney disease, because we're seeing that cats that have dental disease actually have maybe an increased chance for kidney disease as well. So the idea is, because we're able to make these connections by studying the oral microbiome and their genome, it's essentially limitless what we can do in terms of the research. So as long as we can get those cats involved and in our research programs, yeah, we'd love to study more diseases and see how they're connected.
Okay. And then from my understanding with like human DNA is that it's roughly made up of like the last 7 or 8 generations of ancestors. So is that the same with cat DNA?
Yeah, so cat DNA is even more, recent and new. And it definitely doesn't get the attention that it deserves. And actually, Basepaws has been able to update the actual cat genome with our data and actually making that better. So the published cat genome actually had, some regions that were missing that Basepaws was able to help update. So we're really, we love kind of being involved in research and science, and even working with improving the human health aspects, because there's so much overlap. But I think there's a lot more work to be done into the future, because it's just an area that doesn't get a lot of attention.
Okay. Is there an indicator for hypersensitivity to flea bites?
That is an interesting question. So, I mean, we are looking at markers for a lot of diseases that we don't, have a good answer for in veterinary medicine. So some of the top ones that we think about are like IBD or allergic dermatitis. So we're actually recruiting for some of those inflammatory allergy diseases. So if you go onto our website, I would encourage you to apply and see if you qualify, because it's something that we're curious about too, just because we don't know the answer, and see if we can find some correlations.
Okay. And so Nadia has actually asked if I can share Bagheera's breed results. So I'm going to.
Yeah, I was curious about that too.
Yeah, so I'm going to share my screen because I do have his results pulled up. Let's see. Okay, so here is Bagheera's results. Now I know that we can move this line back and forth. What does that do?
Yeah, so the slider is a new feature that we added to kind of show you some options, and it's basically telling us about the statistical confidence of our test. And if you want to just slide it all the way to the right, that's where I like to start to look at, and that's where we're most confident in our similarity matching. So the algorithm is saying, 44% of Bagheera is definitely in this Western group. And you can see the breakdown for the different breeds. But what's really interesting to me is his polycat number. So almost half of Bagheera is still unknown at this point in time, right? So what I would do is keep an eye on that particular number with the report updates, because our goal essentially is to get that number down as close to 0 as possible as we add new cats into our database, so that we are matching 90% of your cat's DNA to cats that have known markers, so we can actually see the different breed breakdowns. Because right now we only know about half of Bagheera's breed and what he matches to. So I'm really curious of the other half. Are there some traits that you're seeing that we don't yet have a match for here, but is it coming maybe in a future update as we add more cats that are similar to Bagheera?
So, and then I'm going to assume that these, the number letter combinations on the left-hand side are the chromosomes.
That's right, yeah. And there should be 19 pairs like that.
Okay, and then I would say one thing I really did like about this is this little breakdown here, where, you know, I could look and say, okay, he's 3.27% Egyptian Mal, and then actually see, well, oh yeah, his face does look a little bit like that.
Yeah, I actually think that's a really fun tool there. And you know, I think about how many, you know, years and years of evolution that has taken, you know, cat breeds to be what they are. And for us to be able to, you know, go all the way back and say, you know, all the different pieces of genetic DNA that makes up your cat, I think that's pretty phenomenal.
Right. And then as I was saying, you know, oh, I was curious about this wild cat index, because it seems like everything I looked at, it was, you know, every cat is related to one of these big cats.
Yeah, that's something that we like to do for fun, you know, and that's something you can, you know, think about your cat as being, you know, essentially a wild, you know, little wild animal that you have in your house, because humans actually didn't have much to do with how they came about. So that's just kind of a fun thing that we do.
Yeah, well, I will say one of the ways that Bagheera got his name is because we were calling him a little panther. And The Jungle Book happens to be
Disney
one of
fan,
my
yeah.
favorite movies, and he's all black. So,
I love
you know,
it.
but then it was because he was the Black Panther, and we're also, you know, Marvel fans. It's Bagheera T'Challa. So,
Okay.
wow. Okay. So I hope that satisfied Nadia's curiosity, and you know, everyone else that's watching too. Like, the DNA has very valuable information, and I've experienced it firsthand to tell you that it is so very interesting, and it really kind of explained a little bit more about my cat. And you know, we can it does strengthen that relationship, because understanding where he came from and some of the traits that he either has now or may develop, we can help foster those traits as well. Like, knowing that he is an elite athlete, we can, you know, make more obstacles for him.
Yeah, and we're, you know, just scratching the surface when it comes to cats and DNA. So we have big dreams, and we want to really make the world better for cats.
So, okay, so a couple more questions, Dr. Kash. Do you have, is there, you know, a percentage rate of how many cats will have at least one high-risk result?
So part of that question, I mean, it's a good question. Part of it is how many things that we test for. So that would change your chance of seeing a high risk result, because we're right now actually in the middle of a big update to the number of health markers that we test for. But a lot of the genetic predispositions that we think about, a lot of them actually don't have too many terrible clinical symptoms. So a lot of them can be managed, or, you know, if you just keep an eye on it. So I think a lot of the time you're going to just get that peace of mind. Okay, I've tested for all of these different diseases and he is negative. But in the rare chance that there is a positive result, then, you know, we have a lot of support in terms of, you know, what you can do and how you can work with your veterinarian. And it's actually better for you to know early than to have something develop where you have less options or the more expensive options. So it's genetic diseases in cats definitely are on the rare side. But say, for example, the oral microbiome, that's something you can actually do now to understand the risk your cat might develop dental disease, which is so common if they're any older than 3 years of age. So it's a good way for you to kind of plan and proactively prevent some of those diseases that we know are so much more common than genetic diseases.
All right, and we have a couple of questions coming in about how much behavior has to do with DNA.
Oh, yes. Is there a specific question, or do you want me to kind of tell you
No,
what I think?
so, you know, the question is just, you know, is about social factors and DNA.
You guys might remember, you know, I referred to the epigenetics. So that's everything, you know, your lifestyle, diet, environment, personality, you know, everything that comes that makes your cat outside of their genetic makeup. And we like to say nature versus nurture. You know, the nature comes from the actual genetic makeup of your cat, which we can't really change at this point in time. But nurture is, you know, what you guys do, what we do. And there's a lot that can change. So especially when it comes to behavior issues, you know, we talked with a behavior specialist yesterday, and you guys can watch that as well. There's a lot that we can do to enrich them. And a lot of even health problems that we see, for example, litter box issues they go back to maybe a behavior issue. So there's a lot that we can do to understand them. And genetics is one way, but also just thinking about what do they do in nature? What have we maybe taken away from them that they're trying to find in your house? And how can we make it more comfortable for them? So, you know, we're still learning as well. And, you know, maybe there is some genetic component and maybe there is a food gene in cats. We have to still find it. But I think at the end of the day, genetics is one component, but there's so much more to your cat and what makes them unique.
Yeah. So is alopecia a genetic disposition?
So we're actually researching that one as well. So, you know, it could be some kind of an allergic reaction or a different type of disease that's presenting, you know, like ringworm, things like that. So that's not particularly a genetic disease, but we don't know if certain cats are prone to the allergy. So we say, you know, allergic dermatitis is a particular type of disease. We don't know right now if that's something, you know, is there a genetic component to it? So that's why we're studying it actively. So if you have a cat that you know, have a diagnosis from your veterinarian, you would totally qualify for our study and get a free kit as well. So I really encourage you to check that out.
Okay. And so, like, Bagheera is a little over a year old, and we just, you know, he had his DNA test. Is it recommended down the line in 5 years or so to get another DNA test?
So with DNA, if you're looking at, you know, breed and health, what's really great about Basepaws is we keep your sample and your DNA doesn't change, but the report will change because we're changing what our database contains. So you'll actually receive those updates as we make those updates. But what I want to point out is that that's different from the oral microbiome because that changes, you know, daily, changes hourly, depending on, you know, what you're eating, what medications you're on, if you go outside, all of those things. So that's something, you know, I would say if you do your first oral microbiome or a dental test and you make some changes, you know, whether you get a dental cleaning at the vet, you start a home care routine, that's something that might be good to do, you know, every few months to keep an eye on the microbiome. See if you're on the right track. Are you preventing disease? Are you going, is your risk increasing? So that would be something that's good to do repeatedly.
Okay. Let's see. Can you tell which parent a cat gets their treats from?
You mean a human parent?
Yeah, like I get my blue eyes from my dad and, my my pudgy nose from my mom.
That's funny. So that type of testing is called parentage testing. And you can actually get that type of testing done. You just have to have your parents' samples as well. It's not something
Oh,
Basepaws offers, but yes, that is something you can do.
so it's something that I wouldn't be able to do with Bagheera because I got no idea.
Cats, yeah, for the most part, cats, yeah, we won't know.
Can DNA tests determine if a cat will become deaf or have a seizure disorder?
That's a good question. So I know that we have some markers for eye disease, so retinal degeneration. So if your cat will go blind, that's something we can test for. At this time, I don't believe we have one for deafness. I may be wrong, but I don't think so. And I don't know if there is that marker identified, you know, in general. But yes, we're always looking for, genetic markers and trying to add them to our test. So if you think we are missing something, drop us a line. We'd love to hear.
Okay, one last question and then we're gonna do our giveaway.
Oh,
So
yes. Okay.
do different breeds have different nutritional needs that can be identified by the DNA test?
Great question. And, this is something as a veterinarian I would love to know, because, yeah, there are some cats that are like little labs and will, eat up your treats. And you want to know, is there something I could be doing differently? Cats do like to make things complicated in the sense that, they're not all one breed. So it's going to be a little tough for us to figure that one out. But I do think we can find certain markers that they might have that make them either more or less prone to, certain nutritional either deficiencies or being having a higher appetite or all those things. So at this point, there is no clear, answer, but it's something definitely we're interested in exploring.
Okay, that's good to know. So now the most exciting part, I think, of our webinar today is we have two giveaways. One is going to be for a Basepaws DNA kit, and the second will be for the Basepaws dental health kit. Okay.
Awesome.
Oh, I'm gonna go ahead and show my screen. If you guys, we're here live today, obviously. Your name is on this wheel, and as you can see, there are quite a few names on here. So it's totally random. We're gonna click to spin, and our DNA kit is gonna go to, looks like Mary Dookie. So, and Mary, I will get a hold of you to get this to you. Mary is actually one of our amazing volunteers.
Awesome. Congrats, Mary.
And then our dental kit is going to go to, it looks like Jenny Bowser. And Jenny, I will go ahead and get a hold of you as well to get your kit to you. So,
Congrats.
Dr. Kash, thank you so much for joining us today. There were a lot of questions, and I know that we didn't get to them all just due to timing of it. You guys can go ahead and send your questions into outreach@pasadenahumane.org. And I will, Dr. Kash, if you wouldn't mind, I can include your contact information when I send out the video.
Sure. Sounds great.
So, all right, I hope everybody enjoyed this webinar and talking about cat genetics and understanding our feline fur babies a little bit more. And Dr. Kash, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
All right, have a good afternoon.
Bye, you too.
Bye.